Final race of the season, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, wasn't a thriller. It wasn't a thriller, but there was still a race win for Max Verstappen, second win of the season for him, and some crucial championship standings playing out in the Constructors. And we'll have a look at how those unfolded. So, McLaren v Racing Point for third in the Constructors, a great result for either one of them. Normally, they're fighting for best of the rest, which is fourth, but this year Ferrari have just not been competitive enough, and it's allowed this opportunity for the midfielders. And Racing Point were in such a strong position after Perez's win. Stroll made it a double podium in Sakir, but he had to start from the back, Sergio Perez, and McLaren were flying. Lando Norris qualified fourth, Carlos Sainz in sixth. It was set for a really nice showdown between the two teams. Perez was making his way through calmly, steadily, up into 14th place on lap 10 when his engine failed.
I lost the engine again. I'm off.
A pretty crucial blow for Racing Point. Once again, reliability, the Mercedes engine in the back of that car. Nothing the team had done wrong there, but the Mercedes engine's let go for Perez twice in 3 races, and he's the one that's been scoring the bulk of the points, which left Lance Stroll having to effectively beat Carlos Sainz in this battle, with Norris having a really strong drive, ending up in 5th place. It was going to be a Sainz v Stroll shootout, and it got close at one moment. Let's have a look at this one. So coming into the pit lane on virtual safety car, Carlos Sainz pits. Everyone pretty much pitted, apart from Ricciardo, who couldn't, starting on a hard tyre, and the 2 Ferraris, one of which couldn't, the other one, Charles Leclerc, chose not to. But everyone else pits, and Sainz is coming in. He's got Stroll behind. The thing is, for Sainz, he's double stacking because he's just behind Lando Norris by about 4.5 seconds. There's enough time for McLaren to pit Norris and be ready for Sainz, but it's really, really tight. Sainz asks on the radio, he says, "Do you need me to create a gap?" And they say, "No, we think we're okay." But as a driver, you don't necessarily trust. You know a 4-second gap is going to be really tight. When a pit stop is 2 to 3 seconds, you want to be just giving a little bit more. And Sainz does that. He comes into the pit lane, and look, as he goes down to the limiter, look how much Stroll catches him at that moment. Then Carlos Sainz, he's just backing off ever so slightly once and twice, then pulls into his pit stop. The McLaren guys do a really good stop and get him out. Very good stop considering they've just done Lando Norris's pit stop as well. And if we switch on board with Stroll, look how far back he is. He was a couple of seconds back from Sainz on this lap. It's virtual safety car, so the whole field's not bunching up at this moment. The full safety car only came after this round of pit stops. But here we see Stroll turning the right-hander into the pit lane. And look, Sainz just brakes a bit early and he slows it down a little bit more than would be normal. And Stroll catches him quite a bit. Then you see once again, Sainz just slow a little bit. Then he slows a little bit more and peels into his McLaren pit bay. So all that's really done, it's not really hindered Stroll too much. He's had to blend ever so slightly out of the throttle for Sainz lifting off through the pit lane. But fundamentally, he's just caught Sainz a lot on that whole phase. And now it's a direct shootout. Racing Point mechanics against the McLaren mechanics. Remember, the McLaren mechanics have just done a pit stop for Norris, and they've got to be ready for this absolutely spot-on pit stop of Sainz. Racing Point have only got 1 car in the race now. They also do a reasonable stop, but if we run it through, Sainz just gets through there, and that's kind of the end of it. They both miss out to the 2 Ferraris who filter in between Norris and Sainz, and that ends up being the end of Lance Stroll's race. He never really manages to pass Sebastian Vettel, loses so much ground. Racing Point drop out of contention. Now, it was investigated by the stewards. I can only imagine this is because Racing Point highlighted this to race director Michael Massey in a kind of desperate bid to get Sainz a penalty. They know they're on the back foot. Their main guy's out of the race. And even Perez starting from last, we know what he can do. He showed it already in Sakir, and he was on a charge. But with Perez out of the race, they need Stroll to beat Sainz. And it felt like a little bit of a desperate move for this one to be investigated. And if we see, this is an interesting part here, the data of Sainz coming into the pit lane. The 2 lines, Sainz in the solid orange and Norris in the dotted orange. And you can see the pit lane speed limiter at 80 kph in the red, the straight line. So you can see as they come round and braking to the pit limit, Norris comes in and he actually slows down quite a lot below the 80 kph, Lando Norris already. And Sainz does slow down a little bit earlier and a little bit to a lower speed, to about 60 kph, whereas Norris was down to about 66 before quickly accelerating up to the 80 kph you're allowed to go. So Norris has got a bit of margin there to be a little bit quicker on the entry, but fundamentally he's braked later than Sainz, and he's found a bit of time here. Sainz has dropped back, and we saw that on board with Stroll. You see Stroll catch Sainz quite a lot in this phase, but then if you just look at the speed graph, it's pretty much mirroring the pit limit there. They're capped. As soon as you press the button, you're limited to 80 kph. And then you see this orange line, the dotted line stays up of Norris. The orange line just blends out once and then twice to 70 kph and 75 kph before getting back on the throttle. And this will be Sainz just looking ahead and just seeing the other McLaren in the pit garage. And it's just an instinctive reaction really to see, oh, they're not necessarily ready for me, just blend out ever so slightly. And fundamentally, this is what Racing Point were not happy with. It did back up Stroll ever so slightly. Stroll also had to lift, and it cost him a tiny bit of time. But actually, from the moment they came into the pits to the moment they left the pits, Sainz only lost 3/10 to Lando Norris. Stroll lost 2/10 to Lando Norris. Compared to the fastest pit stop, which was Max Verstappen's, Stroll only lost 8/10. This wasn't an absolute deal breaker. It was a bit of a grasp, but trying to get your rivals a penalty. And if you look at the pit stops themselves, you can see how good a job Sainz did to be later on the brakes than Norris coming in, and then the McLaren crew did a good stop and Sainz accelerated away. That part was crucial for Sainz. He was feathering on the throttle, that's clear, but he also nailed the stopping on his marks. The mechanics did the rest and he got out quickly. That's the bit that kept him ahead of Stroll and was really crucial in that McLaren battle. So ultimately, nothing to see here. In the end, I have to say I'm not quite understanding why this could only be investigated after the race, in a race where there was nothing else to be investigated. This feels like something that was pretty simple and could have been sorted out at the time. You'd hate to see this one be decided after the race and Stroll finishes within 5 seconds of Sainz, and then the stewards have got a huge decision to make for third in the Constructors' Championship, which has big payouts for the team that gets ahead. In the end, the stewards decided no penalty was needed, but it's just a shame we don't get these decisions a little bit quicker, because this one, to me, looks pretty cut and dry. Sainz did slow down, but you're allowed to just slow down ever so slightly. There's no rule against that. It's driving unnecessarily slowly and really bunching up a load of cars, which I don't think he did. It was really marginal and quite a normal thing, I think, from Sainz. So then that was kind of it. Stroll, after that, dropping back. He really needed to be pressuring Sainz, even on the safety car restart, but Sainz cleared both Ferraris quite quickly. McLaren had a really good race and ended up finishing 5th and 6th. Big points for them, and very happy team at the end. And it was a really difficult race as well for Lance Stroll. In the end, dropping back and even being passed by Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon in the Renault on the final lap, complaining of losing the tyre temperature in his hard tyres late on. This can happen when you do a long stint on the hard tyres. You wear away some of the rubber and it becomes harder to actually keep the temperature in the tyres when there's less rubber there to keep them insulated. And Stroll complaining of that. Racing Point have been so good on their tyres at many times, but probably means because they're not overheating them. And here they needed to get the temperature in and it cost Stroll a bit. But I don't think he could have done enough on his own there to beat McLaren on a day where they were really, really strong. And with both of their drivers delivering well through the whole of the season, very consistent, you'd have to say, they take this third place. So that was a look into the crucial little pit stop battle between Racing Point and McLaren, but there was still more to filter out later on, and also a look into the win of Max Verstappen. Check it out on F1 TV.